3, 2, 1. Even though he just did that, I don't know. I feel like my brain can't mentally switch.
Well, see, now you ruined the purpose of it because you talked after.
Well, guess what? I'm talking again after.
I want you to put all of this in there, like as a trailer.
Here we go.
Okay. 5, 6, 7, 8.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Young Adult Podcast. My name is Connor, and I will be your host. Joining me today, we have Young Adult's very own Kaci, Mexico, and Milanna Martellero Bakken.
You actually said my maiden name right. I'm super impressed.
I say your maiden name right all the time. It's your first name that apparently I pronounce incorrectly.
We can't get into this.
Melania.
Wrong. Milanna.
Oh.
Like the city Milan.
Oh.
But sometimes people are like, my husband calls me Milanna when he's
Your
mad
own
at me.
husband.
And I'm like, that's not my name.
Oh, no.
No, I know. I really don't care.
Okay.
But Aaron and Connor were very up in arms about it. They're like, have we been saying it wrong this whole time?
1000%. And I told her, like, no offense. I can't change it.
Well, you lost your very Italian last name.
It's
and
true.
Now your
At
first
this
name
point-
is like all you have.
At this point,
For it.
it is what it is. I'm
Okay.
like, I'm not even Italian anymore. Consider me a Viking. Call me
So,
Milanna.
Milanna is here joining us today. Guys, how's life?
You know, great.
It's great.
Casey and I got our matching mugs.
Ooh,
Right
let's
here.
cheers.
Look at that.
Designed by our one and only KP.
Bow, bow, bow.
She's not even up here for her
Wow.
praise. We're trying to
Trying
give her
to give
flowers.
her a shout out, and she's just doing something somewhere else.
Honestly,
Guys,
probably doing a lot of work.
What are you drinking right now?
I have matcha.
Gross.
Black, pour over, just black coffee.
Okay.
If that doesn't just give you a preview into
Who we
the
are.
difference between
Like
Guys,
to drink a salad.
let's give us your drink hot take when it comes to
Okay.
non-alcoholic beverages, because alcohol is for sinners.
Mm.
I'm kidding.
Like any drink. Oh, I have one, but we can't get into this again.
What is it?
The Olipop versus Poppy debate. Like
I was thinking more like coffee and
Oh,
stuff.
coffee,
Since that's
okay,
what you're
okay.
literally drinking right now,
Oh.
but I'm kidding.
I
Um,
think the ambiance
hot
in the
takes.
place can make bad coffee taste good. So, like,
100%.
diner
Yes.
coffee is amazing. Instant coffee while you camp is amazing. But if you pull any of those things from their designed place, they're not good.
I disagree because I think instant coffee is better than like fancy
Connor.
coffee.
In your house in the morning.
I drink Nespresso or like freeze dried coffee from Whole Foods.
Oh,
It's like Whole
okay.
Foods organic decaf coffee. I
Okay.
just pour hot water on it.
No.
I feel like
Listen.
my hot take isn't even hot. It's just that I hate Starbucks coffee. That's why I have
Oh, please. Starbucks coffee's awesome.
it's burnt. It literally tastes burnt to
And
me.
that's why it tastes
they
good.
burn their
Because
beans.
you want to know why? And this is no knock to Corvus or Sweet Bloom, whatever.
Love Corvus. love
Nice
Sleep
coffee is acidic. It's so acidic that it's gross.
Yeah.
It's
Bloom.
what I
mean,
imagine.
It depends.
It's what I imagine inside of a battery would, like a car battery would taste
I
like.
like it when it's that bitter.
No, I hate it.
Oh.
I hate it. And can we just be honest? It's just like people in wine. You can't taste the freaking ground
I
where it's from.
absolutely can.
You cannot
And I
taste
used to drink Starbucks
blueberries
all the time.
and freaking chai. Like you can't.
At
Because
Sweet
one, that's just
Bloom?
gross together. Blueberries.
Well, I
and
get
chai.
like a latte, so yeah, I can't
So you
taste
can't
like the...
taste it. You taste the milk.
Guys,
That's
I
what
think
you
this is the
taste.
biggest thing I lie about. I go to Sweet Bloom, I'm friends with the baristas. They're like, we have a new Colombian coffee, Mario, da da da.
Yeah.
And I'm
you
like,
can
give me
taste-
that one, Kate. She gives it to me. She's like, do you taste like the bourbon notes? I'm like, yep. I don't taste any of that.
No,
it tastes the same.
Guess what it tastes like? Coffee and battery acid.
I just don't
That's
want
what
it
it
to
Sorry,
tastes
Kate at
taste
Sweet Bloom.
burnt. I don't care what notes there are. I'm gonna add a syrup in there anyways.
Nope.
But
You want a super hot take? I like Folgers. Deal with it, dude.
that is a
Deal
hot
with
take.
it.
That is a hot take.
No.
Deal with it. I'll drink Folgers 99% of the time. I don't buy Folgers, but I'll drink it. And I like it a
Connor.
lot.
No.
No.
Yes.
Sponsor us, Folgers.
That's
I bet
still
you.
not as bad as Starbucks.
I bet you if we put out a poll, 90% of people would agree with me. It's a status thing.
Think about
and
your
it's
audience
a,
right
it's
now.
a status thing and it's a cultural thing. It's cool.
I would agree with
it's
that.
cool to like trendy coffee.
But it's actually better. These people like work really hard at their craft. And it's like,
I'm not
it's
knocking
good.
I'm not knocking their grind. I'm knocking. Well, I kind of am, pun intended.
Knocking their
Michael Scott.
grind.
Michael
I really
Scott.
wish we had a button. No, but I'm not knocking their work ethic. I'm knocking the product.
Maybe because you're just older, your palate has not been as.
I've got one of the most refined palates on the planet.
You have 2 kids. You're so tired. You just need something that communicates it's going to keep you up.
Yeah, for someone who like loves fine food and like cuisine, I'm shocked that you
Exactly. My
can drink
palate's so
Folgers.
refined that I can tell when something is bullcrap. Guys, this little hot take has taken up 5 minutes of our podcast.
Are you
I
in a
didn't expect for
relationship?
us to argue
Okay.
this long about it.
So guys, first off, we have a one event coming up.
We do.
We do. February 27th is the Young Adult One event. Kaci, tell us about the one event. What is it?
One event. We are encouraging all the young adults in our current community to invite a friend or honestly anyone that you would run into to this event to hear the message of Jesus.
Yeah.
I think sometimes there's an assumption that a lot of people know about Jesus and know why he lived and died and that he resurrected. And the goal is to invite them to a fun event with churros and coffee and a nice
Folgers
message.
coffee.
Folgers coffee.
Uh-huh.
No, just to maybe try different. I don't know, get a different relationship with church and people of God and Christians. And so I think sometimes when we say invite your friends, it feels really vague. And so for this event, we're like, just invite one friend.
Yeah. The heart of it is we want to encourage our people. Sharing our faith is a huge part of our faith. Jesus talks about it a lot. Paul encourages us to do it. And yet sometimes it can be one of the most intimidating things we can do. We don't know how. Inviting somebody maybe on a random Thursday feels kind of vague. And so we've literally designed an event where the one purpose is for you to practice sharing your faith, having conversations, being bold, and inviting that one person that you feel like needs to be there, needs to experience the community, the message of Jesus, or just know that there are other Christians out there like them, or maybe they have questions about faith and spirituality and they don't believe in God. Whatever it is, we are really catering this to be a conversation where anybody can come hear the good news about Jesus and find community. And so February 27th, we'll have guest speaker. Like Kaci was saying, we have a lot of stuff out in our lobby that honestly is just going to be a good time. Like even if you come and church isn't like your thing, I genuinely do believe you'll come, you'll have a good time, you'll meet some good people. And so young adults, if you are part of our community on Thursday nights, invite somebody to this event. February 27th, you'll hear more about it on these podcasts and in person on our Thursday night services. So today we are taking this podcast to sort of introduce a series that we're going to jump into after our one event. We are going to jump into a relationship series. I know we do relationship series every year, but that's because we believe that relationships are important, that everybody to some capacity will be involved in relationships, whether they be platonic, friendships, sexual, whatever it may be. You will find yourself in a relationship. And so it's important to kind of have a faith-based perspective and to understand and talk through why we believe and act in accordance to certain things. And that's what we're going to talk about today, more relationship stuff. So yeah, we're just going to kick off the conversation on relationship. I'll tell you what the series is going to be called, but we're going to keep that a secret.
Mm-hmm.
You need to come and listen to the series because we also don't know what it's going to be called, but it will be called something awesome. Okay, so let's dive into the conversation. The first thing I kind of want to talk about is this. Do you think that modern dating is actually harder, or are people just overcomplicating it? With all the dating apps, social media, the seemingly unlimited options, do you think we are making it more difficult than it needs to be, or is it genuinely harder to find a real, authentic connection in today's dating world?
Yeah. I'm actually really curious what your answer will be, but I can speak to it. I think we're overcomplicating it. I don't know that it's actually harder. You and I are obviously both married, so I'll be interested to hear Kaci's perspective as someone who's single. But I think that there is a level to it of like the endless options that you talked about, like the fear of finding something better, that there's like other options out there, like on Hinge versus Bumble or whatever, or mixers, there's so many ways to meet people now. And I think of like, even, it's funny, I was thinking about this the other day because my friend's having an event and I needed to get like a dress for it. And I spent so long looking for something to wear. Online shopping, and endless options of checking different places, different websites. And I was like, I am like overthinking this for 100%. And it's like the phenomenon of like the paradox of choice, that like that idea that having too many options can make like decision making challenging and lead to like less satisfaction about the choices you made, because there's so much else out there that even when they do meet people, they're like, oh, well, they're like, there could be something else. Like, what about that other person that just like messaged me, or what about, so I feel like from what I've seen, there is an overcomplication to it with all the options. It's like, yeah, you're like, there's always more at my fingertips to like new people, the possibility of like, oh, maybe my perfect match downloaded Hinge yesterday.
Yes.
And so should I see this through, or, so that's my perspective, and I'm interested to see.
No, I was going to actually bring up the same thing because I'm not on dating apps, but I was trying to find a vacuum on Amazon the other day. My God. You guys, 4 stars, 4.5 stars, but this many ratings with the 4 stars, but a lot more ratings with 3.5.
Right.
This cost, you guys, it is so stressful. And then you start to read all the reviews and it's a lot. But
like
I was
to
saying,
see the pictures.
Yeah,
there's reviews with pictures.
The pictures. I'm like, that girl doesn't look good in it, but I could look good in it probably. I don't know. But what I was going to say is I think there is like a statistic or data that reveals like the less research you do widely, the more satisfied you are with your purchase. And someone can fact check me. I don't know what article that I was reading. It was on the New York Times. They like send me random stuff, and I'm a sucker for like a opinion piece or whatever. But I do think buyer's remorse is a real thing when you know that you have access to unlimited options.
Right.
And so if you, you know what? I'm gonna go on a date with this guy. We match, whatever. He's cool. He's awesome. Oh, but what about?
Right.
And I wonder, like, this is maybe a random question. How long do people date before they are like, we're gonna delete our apps? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
true.
Is deleting your app like a big thing?
I think it's like
because the search is over.
Yeah, because
are you really committed?
Was that Match.com's slogan? Like the app that's made
the
to be
search
deleted?
is over.
It's definitely a slogan. I don't know if it's
that's
Match,
a good
but
that's some good marketing right there.
Hinge. It was Hinge. Calvin, thank you for that.
But I'm like, if I'm dating
Our
someone,
fact checker over there.
I don't want to really delete that. I mean, I want to keep that. I wouldn't want to keep that.
I know.
And that sounds horrible.
Till when? You're engaged?
I don't know. No, that feels messed up.
That's the question of
I
it,
guess
though.
it's this idea of like,
is it cheating if you're dating and you open it and are looking on it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, if you're exclusive.
Let's rewind this like 20 years. Is it cheating if you're going to the club and eyeing other girls and potentially thinking about like getting their number and asking them out?
I mean, I would say yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just
but
different
it's also
with
I'm a wholesome Christian man. No, I'm totally
It's like that's the difference. It's at your fingertips,
Yeah.
I think
it's like that instant gratification that I think really over complicates things and gives you that like paradox of choice.
So do you think, to go back to the question, do you think it's harder dating today than it was maybe pre-app dating, or do you think we are making it harder? Like, are we overcomplicating it, or is it legitimately more difficult? I would say we're overcomplicating it because I don't think the ability to have more options is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think the overcomplication comes from the dissatisfaction once you land on somebody, which is you overcomplicating it.
It's the intention behind it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's if you're on there and you're swiping right to like everybody, you're lining up dates one after the other, bachelor style. That's obviously like not good intention behind it. But if I feel like I have to make the balancing statements because my best friends in the world met on Hinge. And they're like amazing together. But both of them were like, got on there for a minute, swiped, went on a date.
Yeah.
Didn't like pursue things with, they used it very intentionally.
Yeah.
And then deleted it. So I think it's a matter of like guarding your heart. I know that sounds so like Christianese, but it's like
Yeah.
It's not anyone else's job to do it. So if you're getting on there, you know, and not doing that, and then you're surprised that it's hard and that it's challenging and that your heart's getting broken, it's like, yeah, because you maybe weren't, the intentions behind it weren't great.
Yeah, that's true too. And those stories are good, but then people are like, that has to be my
cling
story.
to that.
So the one true love narrative that I think is like in every Disney movie ever, and it's the one true love, that actually has continued to persist in like the hearts of people while we're in like an increasingly open, like Love Island, for example.
Yeah,
I know, it's
never
so
seen it,
embarrassing.
but
me neither.
I actually have never seen it.
They have all this language like, well, I'm with this person, but I'm still open. And well, I actually
No way.
Oh yeah,
It's all about like coupling up
and finding
then
the right
finding
person.
another couple and potentially coupling up with a different person later.
And the only
I
way
thought you were
to
about
find
to.
them.
I thought you were about to say
No.
quad couple.
I think
no,
they can only have.
They're like all pursuing monogamy.
Yeah.
But in the pursuit of that, they think you have to like try before you buy and be open with the person that you're with.
Okay.
But you're with somebody to remain safe. And so people are always open. But you can tell by watching the show, the human heart, they're in hell. Like they are literally they're like, why am I crying all the time? I'm open. Oh, I just saw the girl I like with 4 other people. Like, I don't know why it's bothering me so much. And it's like, what? Like, how? And they're like hard on themselves.
Right.
So I think there's this like, they have like, I need to find the true perfect one. Yet they're surprised when they actually do connect with 4 people. And it's like, well, I don't know. There's like these competing ideologies.
I know. And
Yeah.
I think it's like was it like Proverbs 25 that like too much of a good thing can become a bad thing? So it's like your desire to be in a relationship, your desire to find that person that you connect with, that you can see starting a life with. The desire for monogamy is such a good thing.
Yes.
And like from the Lord. But if you are like on there overcomplicating it by like, you know, swiping, looking and thinking like he's got to be out there somewhere, and like maybe this guy wasn't it because, you know, he isn't interested in pickleball or whatever, you know, and you overcomplicate it, I think, because if you like, you know, if the intention behind it is like the want and the desire is good.
Yeah.
But, you know, the context of Love Island is obviously not ideal or helpful.
Yes.
And so I think, dating apps can become a little Love Island-y if you're not careful.
Oh, and everyone's customizing their ideal.
Yeah.
And their lists are crazy long.
Yeah.
Of their green flags and their, like,
Non-negotiables.
what's your type? If I ask someone what their type is, it's a long list. Long. And their icks are quite long. We were talking about icks.
Oh, gosh. I have a friend
like,
whose ick list was, like, endless.
Yeah, and
I'm like, you're never going to find anybody.
I was like, what is your idea? What do you realize? They're not going to, like, not be a human being.
Yeah.
Like, what? I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like it really leads into, like, the next question you had on here.
It does. I have a message written out somewhere in my notes that I, of course, can't find. But it's about, like, preferences versus, like, when everybody's like, well, I'm just going to be patient and wait for, like, because I know my man is going to be 6'4" and this and that and that. I'm like, that's not like, that's not like a godly characteristic.
Right.
That's just like a preference, you know? Like, God doesn't promise your preference. Like,
True.
He encourages you to seek out, like, godly characteristics. But, okay, yes, this second question does, like, couple with the first question. Do you think with the rise of dating apps, social media, all this feeling of unlimited options, people have begun to look for validation outside of looking for love? Do you think there's like, we have used sort of the technology that has hopefully with like good intention been like, we want to give people more options that they might not know exist to like find their person. Do you feel like people use these dating apps for self-validation outside of actually trying to find true, genuine connection?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
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 And I want to say, like, too, we're all guilty of this. Like, your human desire to be, like, known and to be fully loved, like, that is from the Lord. And so if you're, like, lonely and you're, like, wanting that validation, that's, like, so normal. We're all, you know, it feels good to, like, have a crush, you know, or to, like, get validation from someone. Like, everyone, you know, that feels good for everybody. So I, like, don't want to, like, shame people of, like, you're wrong. You're just looking for validation. I'm like, totally. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But, like, it's it's always going to fall short. Like, that's not, that's not where it's going to come from. That's not what you're ultimately looking for.
Like within your marriage, even, you probably have to check
Yeah.
yourself.
I'm like, if
oh, am I seeking this from God or
Yes.
from Jake? Or
if I relied on my husband to give me all the validation that I need in the world, oh my gosh, I would be the most like insecure and unhappy person in the world.
yeah,
Because he is wonderful.
yeah,
But like at the end of the day, he's not always gonna know when I'm like feeling what I'm feeling. He's not
Yes.
always gonna be like say the right thing when I'm like, can I wear this or does it make me look fat?
Yes, yes,
like
yes.
it's gonna be like Connor. It just is gonna not, ultimately be what sustains you. And so the desire to like have partnership and to like have companionship
yeah.
and to do life with someone, that's amazing.
Hmm.
But the validation like side of it, that's what's gonna like crush.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna not be what you need.
Do you think people have switched looking for love? Like, do you think people have made looking for love looking for validation with all the options that are out there? Like, do you think they've confused that or conjoined that of like, love for me will be self-validating?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, because I know a lot of people that get into a relationship and I'm like, oh, you're the most confident person I've ever seen all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's right or wrong,
Right.
but I've seen a lot of people when they're dating someone, they are like the height of their confidence. Like they are like pep in their step.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, that's not wrong.
Yeah.
I don't think, to an extent. I mean, that person brings out the best in you or they like you or whatever. But then I think the real kicker is when they've had that and then they don't anymore. And it is like they don't know who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or there's not really any level of security apart from being with
Right.
somebody.
Yeah.
It's like focusing on like self-fulfillment of feeling that validation. Like, I need this to feel good about myself. Versus like, we know the love of God is like self-sacrificing. It's not
Yeah.
self-serving. Like First
Yeah.
Corinthians tells us that. Like it is not self-seeking. It's like patient. It's kind. It like gives itself up. And so, yeah, if we're exchanging like true love, that's going to be what the Lord has for us. It's not going to be like self-validation,
Yeah.
like fulfilling something in you. It's going to be like out of self-sacrifice.
What do you think is a healthy level of personal validation when you are seeking out a relationship? Because I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to demonize
Right.
like finding levels of validation in it. But do you think there is a healthy like amount of personal validation within a relationship, or do you think that it just sort of always leads to people swiping right on you or liking whatever as like an ego boost? Do you feel like there's a difference between
Yeah.
growing your ego and a healthy self-validation within the context of looking for a relationship?
I've been told that I'm not like a good validator as a person.
Okay.
Like someone's like, oh, you said you were proud of me once and I cried. And I'm like, oh gosh, like yikes. Or I have a friend, she's on our worship team and she's like, love me, be my friend. And I'm like, if I'm spending my time with you, we're friends. And I always say, do you want a friend or a fan? And she's just like, okay, you suck. And she doesn't need a lot of validation. So for me, I think I fear if people need my validation to uphold their ego strength because I'm imperfect. And I have this fear that if I'm a part of the thing that's upholding their ego strength, I have to now be on for me and them.
Yeah.
But then I do think there is a point where our love does hold people up and lift people up, and it should.
Yeah.
So I always struggle with that tension because I think I have this fear of like, please don't overly lean on me because I will fail you.
Right.
But then also we're called to like build one another up in love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
So I don't know. I think I'm working through that still personally.
Yeah. I'd say it like this. Like, it should be like a byproduct. Like I'm sure you can feel the same way. Like, I don't sit here and I'm like, Jake like I feel so much validation and like security in Jake. And I'm sure like he does help boost my confidence. He does spur me on. Like, he is so kind to me. He encourages me. He like points out the good in me. He calls me higher, like all the good things that a relationship should do. But it's like a byproduct of like self-sacrificial love. Like, he's doing those things because he is like selflessly caring for me, loving me. I'm like, I feel like you could sit here and be like, of course Aaron validates you, you know? Like you guys love each other and you are committed to that relationship. So I feel like the validation should be like a byproduct, not like the thing that is sustaining you and like the
Yeah.
thing you're seeking out the most above like self-sacrificial love.
Yeah. No, I love that. Okay, we've got 3 more questions that I think are really good to help frame this conversation. We don't have a ton of time, so let's dive
We're
into
gonna do
them.
this. We got this.
Why do so many young professionals you feel like struggle with commitment? Do you feel like it's a fear of settling, an abundance of options, kind of like what we talked about, or do you think it's something maybe deeper inside of themselves that maybe keeps them from committing to somebody for like long term?
Yeah.
I have like something really off base, like something that just popped into my mind.
Okay.
I think, I mean, the divorce rate in our country and in the world is like 50%. And my parents divorced really when I was really young. And I'm nearing the age when they started making choices where those choices had like collateral damage, right? So like, okay, they decided to get married. My dad had his first, daughter out of wedlock when he was 23. And with a woman he didn't want to be, I'm in my 20s and I'm walking through the years that my parents walked through.
Yeah.
And part of me feels like, oh, I don't want to make those same mistakes. I don't want to be another statistic. And so as I like walk through my 20s, I'm like, I feel like I'm on this little tightrope where I'm like, what did they do that I shouldn't do right now? And how do I avoid that statistic? And then you look at Christians and you're like, that statistic actually remains within Christianity. And so my faith can't even, save me from this narrative. And so I think there's something about in your late 20s, you start to think a little bit more of your generational history. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just projecting. But I do think there is this like fear of failure as well. Fear of commitment for sure. But then within that, don't choose wrong. As if like that's the main reason everyone gets divorced. I do think so many other things come into play when a relationship ends or takes a turn. But I think for me, that has definitely popped up into my mind. So I don't know if you guys resonate with that.
No, when I was thinking about proposing to Aaron, I was talking to my grandpa, and he has, I mean, obviously I don't think he coined this phrase, but the paralysis of analysis, like overthinking something, when 95% of the signs like pointed to good, I think that a lot of young adults are looking for a guarantee, and I think they're looking for a sure thing. And when it comes to relationships specifically, that doesn't exist. I think like everything is a risk. The only way to have a sure thing is to work for a sure thing. Like you could match up 100% and you'll still find that you're two different people who don't align on everything or think the same, or a lot of my friends at least tend to realize they marry their exact opposites. That's Aaron and I. We literally think differently on everything. There's very little that we actually naturally agree upon. And when I talk to people, or at least if I were to say that before I were to get married, people would be like, well, then you're not a match because you have to like blue and she has to like blue, and it's like, no, I think like what's stronger than natural chemistry, or like not even chemistry, because I think we have chemistry. What's stronger than like natural alignment is like chosen alignment. That's why God uses a picture of, like marriage as his like choice. We don't naturally align with God. Quite the opposite. The Bible says that we are enemies of God. Like everything we do tends to have a skew or a bend towards sin, selfishness, all this different stuff, the embetterment of ourself, and God chooses us anyway. And I think that I think there is this fear of making the wrong choice. And can you make the wrong choice? For sure. But I think 99.9% of the people listening to this podcast are smart enough to not make the obvious wrong choice.
Right.
I think the fear comes when you kind of are like micro analyzing somebody to the point where you are talking yourself out of a good thing because you're so nervous to make the wrong choice that you'll overlook right choices. And I think that's, if I were to guess, I think that's why a lot of people struggle with commitment. Could there be selfishness in there? For sure. Could there be like abundance of options, of fear? Sure. I think a lot of it is we have placed, and rightfully so, we've placed so much pressure and weight on marriage. And I think there should be, but I think that we've almost made it feel impossible to make the right choice in like a faith space. And then the people that do are these anomalies who somehow found this person that they just magically like get along with.
Yeah.
And 2 nights ago, Erin's like bawling on our couch, like, and I'm trying to be kind, and I make her even more mad. You know what I mean? Like, it's just that you're just at some point you have to choose, and your choice is the right choice, not some hypothetical out there. And I think it's easy for us to attach ourselves to hypothetical outcomes and not reality.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes, at least in my opinion, talking to people and in my own life, that's why it's hard to commit, is because hypothetical is perfect. Reality is like imperfect.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
so.
That's good. It's funny, I actually said like in here, like the best couples I know and the ones that like are really moving the needle when it comes to like honoring their marriage, like creating great kids, like moving the kingdom forward, are people who are like couldn't be more wildly different and just like chose to make a commitment to each other, you know? And it wasn't like God didn't come to you and be like, you have to marry Erin. Like he didn't come to her and be like, Connor, is it? You have to.
Yeah,
You know,
never
like-
got that one time. No, for real, I didn't.
Yeah. And it's like, I think we, especially in Christian world, it puts so much emphasis on like the one. Like, I'm not a believer in that. Like, I think Jake is the one for me because we made a decision to each other, you know, a commitment before God. And so now, you know, we're like, we decided to do that. I wasn't forced into marrying him.
Yeah.
One of like the kindest things that a friend ever said to me when Jake and I were like figuring out all our stuff, deciding whether to get back together, she was like, you know, you don't have to marry him. And I was like, I don't. You know, I'm like 22. I'm like, what? Because I had this idea in my head. I'm like, I feel like the Lord like brought him into my life, you know, and that I'm, you know, that is true for sure. But the pressure of like, there's one thing for you and it's out there. And if you miss it, like everything's going to be messed up. And, you know, that's like the fear. And there's no fear in love, you know, like perfect love drives out fear. And like what fear is like fear of punishment.
Yeah.
And like God's not going to like punish you because, you know, you made the wrong decision or you didn't marry that one person he had for you because you didn't move to Kansas in the right year.
Oh my
and
gosh.
you know, I'm like, that's so silly. That's not free will. That's not.
Yeah.
So I love what you said because I'm like, yeah, it is just like making a commitment and choosing each other and walking in, you know, the will of God.
Yeah, and I know this might not sound like sexy or romantic, but one of the reasons why I did like Erin so much is how we fought. I know that sounds really weird, but like we fought a lot. Like especially in like the beginnings of our relationship, some just stubbornness, some learning how to cohabitate, some trauma. Like you just throw in, you know, an entire human with another human, and you get this recipe for a lot of beautiful things and a lot of conflict. But one of the things I remember, Erin and I had just had a very, very intense conversation. A lot of my baggage, a lot of my history, a lot of my trauma. And it was one of those where I thought like, for sure, this is going to end the relationship. And while I'm not going to sit here and say that she was like so ecstatic, like to hear all this stuff, she was like, okay, well, I'm not trying to exaggerate. I don't think we broke up, but I think she was like, I need to process this. But it doesn't change like how I think of you or whatever. And I do remember like driving home kind of like in limbo of like, what are we? But also the only time I ever felt God speak to me about Erin, which I know might sound weird, was like obviously God spoke to me about Erin a few times, but really I just remember feeling like God was like, you should marry somebody like that who can see the darkest parts of you and not be like repulsed by them, but like find grace in them.
Yeah.
And so, I think, I don't know why we were talking about that. Oh, our fighting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like, but the way she reacted to the worst of me was actually, and how we managed conflict was actually one of the things that drew me closer. I had never had that with somebody. It was normally like, you did what or what? We're over, you know? And it's like, okay. So, all right, we've got about, I don't know, 5 to 6 more minutes before we need to wrap
We can
up.
do this.
2 more that I think a lot of people are really going to relate to. We're teeing up our relationship series titled Come Find Out, to figure out what we're titling it. But here's one that I think a lot of young adults and young professionals can relate to, a tension that they feel, and I'd love to know your all's thoughts about this. Is it possible to both prioritize career growth and find a meaningful relationship at the exact same time? I talk to so many people who aren't dating because they're prioritizing their career. And I don't even necessarily think that's a bad thing, like specifically or necessarily, but do you think it's possible to do both and? Or do you think that really you can only grow in your career if that's your focus, or you can only have a healthy, flourishing relationship if that's your main focus? Do you have to sacrifice in one area or the other to get the best of both worlds?
I think if you develop that ideology, you're always going to have it. So if you do decide to then, okay, my career pause or whatever, now I'm going to get married. Well, can you have kids and have a job, or can you have kids and focus on your marriage?
Yeah.
Like, if we can't be people that see the relationships in our life as the thing that brings out our best self, makes us the most secure to take risks in your career. I have a lot of friends who've gotten married and then have felt safer to pursue dreams and have felt like now they have somebody cheering them on, whereas they had friends before, but they have somebody who, well, you have like your deepest, worst failure, and you get to come home to the person who doesn't care that you failed. And so I don't think those have to be mutually exclusive. I think there is something in our brain that feels better about, like, feels like, well, if I'm committing or pursuing this relationship and it gets messy, or I'm having fights with, Aaron and driving home and then I have to preach the next, whatever. I think we're trying to set boundaries where there doesn't necessarily need to be, and that they can inform each other or help each other. I'm not saying I really like being single personally. But I do have, like, if I did decide to pursue maybe wanting to get married, I think I would have a fear that my career would take a back seat, or pause, or I have friends that got married and have kids, and now they have to make a decision if they want to stay home, and their career they worked for their entire 20s is now like, who's going to not do that? And I hate to, like, bring all those things up, but those are things that people are talking about. I mean, you've probably had to think through a million and one of those things, but I think that if your ideology, if that becomes your way of seeing things, that everything is completely separate and has to be mutually exclusive, when does that end?
Yeah, it's life. That's all part of it. Like, you don't just get married and then you, like, run off and just stay in a forever, like, perpetual like honeymoon state. Like, no, you, like, go back to your real life, And so it's like, you're gonna have a career. Like, I think of what you always say, how you said something in a sermon. I think it was, I can't remember.
It was probably brilliant.
It was like, whatever you had to
joke.
do to maintain or to gain something will be what you have to do to sustain it or to maintain it. And so it's like, at some point you will be married, and it's like, then it'll be even harder if you've, like, worked on, only prioritizing work. Well, then what are you going to do when you have to, like, split? Like, there's so many ebbs and flows of life, like, and different seasons that you're in, of, like, being single and then being married and then being married without kids and then adding a kid into the mix, adding a second kid into the mix, like, new careers, like, life changes. Like, what if you're fired from your job one day? What if, there's a death in the family? Like, there's all these things that you will have in life experiences that you will have to learn how to take care of a marriage through the, like, trials and tribulations of life. So I don't see, like you said, why it has to be mutually exclusive. Like, this is the kind of stuff you're going to be there's different things you're going to be working through in marriage. So I don't think that it has to be one way or the other, because eventually you're going to be,
it's all there.
Potentially in a career change, potentially moving states, having a baby. Like, there's going to be so many ebbs and flows. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. You're going to have to learn how to do this stuff in a marriage eventually.
Yeah. I do. I will say, especially when it comes to dating, because dating tends to be, and maybe I'm wrong, but in my experience in my relationship, and I think with some of my friends, the clinginess and the need for sort of like validation within the relationship tends to go down the longer you're together in like a good way. I'm not saying you become more of like a jerk to the person you're with, but you know, there's this sort of like
Security.
naive but like appropriate and like beautiful like need, like, you know, like Aaron and I would text each other 24/7 and then we call each
Yeah.
other, and then the more comfortable we got, the more secure we got, the less we needed to do that. But I will say I do think that there is a level of maturity you need to understand that that two things can be a priority at the same time, and sometimes when that is the case, something might be sacrificed. Now, I'm not talking about like complete and total like neglect of the other in the sense of sacrifice, but if you're an entrepreneur, you're starting a business, you're passionate about that, and you're in a relationship, this person might need to understand that there might be times where you're not coming home until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and they have to be okay with that, and not see that as an indictment of your feelings or affection like towards them. And then in different seasons, you might have to step back from pursuing certain goals or career things to prioritize the person that you're with. It doesn't necessarily just have to be like the relationship that's suffering. But I will say, not only do I think it's possible, I think it's good because I do think it is more of a realistic picture of life. But I do think, especially when it comes to dating, it'll take two really mature people to be able to do that, because you have to have a sense of security and identity outside of the relationship to know that if somebody is pursuing and advancing in their career while seriously trying to find a relationship, there will be ebbs and flows and sacrifices that have to happen. And you have to be secure enough in that relationship to allow there to be seasons in that relationship. So I do think it's possible. I do think it might not be tricky, because obviously you can't just stop working or like whatever, like put your life on pause to find something. But I think if you are truly trying to grow it at your job and pursue this, it does take wisdom and tact. And you'll just have to find somebody who can like match that.
Yeah.
Okay, random question, hot take. Have you seen The Devil Wears Prada?
No, but I can kind of quote it because of Michael Scott.
Oh, this is like the dilemma.
Honestly,
in the
that's
movie.
the relationship.
She's pursuing her
She's
career and like
growing.
growing and changing, and he's like, "You've changed." And there is such a split of girls that like hate him for holding her back, and then the other
really?
half are like, "She's changed and he's holding her accountable." And I wanted to know your hot take, but you don't.
Where's my
funny.
steak? Too slow. You're not going
Do you
to
have a hot
Paris.
You're not going to Paris.
Do you think he's holding her back? Yeah.
I feel like both things can be true. Like she
Okay.
kind of lost her way a little bit, but she also was like at the
Evolving.
height of her career, you know? And that's like
Guys.
what I love what you said is like find somebody who's secure enough and like wants these things for you that will you feel comfortable walking through that with. You're like, I'm pursuing this, I want to do this, and they're spurring you on, and it's like a healthy balance of it, you know?
That's good.
And they can be a helper in that career growth.
Call Armani
Okay.
on the phone.
You would be
You
quoting
need to
this
watch
through
this
The Office.
movie.
It's like you always miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
That's literally what you're doing
in
right
his
now.
office.
1,000%. Okay, final question. As we wrap up, let me find this question because I'm currently getting spammed by a telemarketer.
It's the very end.
Very end, but I feel like one we could talk about for a long time. So we're just going to give our concise, precise, wisdom-filled thoughts right here.
Okay.
Do you think, for the most part, people are too quick to end relationships instead of working through the challenges they're facing? In a culture that promotes, if it's not working, move on. There's other options out there. We've already talked about sort of the plethora of options. Maybe this just isn't right. Do you think people are giving up on relationships too soon instead of growing through them and growing with them?
Yes, it goes. I'm just going to go back to the consumerism. I mean, I want the new iPhone. If my AirPods kind of look dirty, I'm like, should I get new ones? I think it's just it's our cultural lens, and I think it's carried itself into relationships. I think it's also how people are with friendships as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's I think it's it's a lens that a lot of modern people have that brings itself into relationships. If it's broken,
Right.
don't fix it because you can't really. And why would you develop those skills if you can just get a new one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like we don't want to work for something.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, that'd be too much work, you know. I feel like Jake and I had a similar story to you where we fought a ton in our dating relationship. And we just had to decide, like, is this something we want to work towards and, like, put in the effort for or not? And so you have to figure out what not everything can be a non-negotiable. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, you have to figure out what those are and have good ones. Like, if it's like he doesn't want to go to church. He's, like, not really sure he's into it. He's, like, you know, not on the same page with boundaries, with life, with having kids. Like, yeah, those make sense. But non-negotiables shouldn't be like, oh, well, he, you know, like storms off when he's mad and we don't fight well. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe like, if you want to figure it out, like,
my friend,
good things take work.
She found out her fiance didn't like Disney, and I think her parents, she was going through something, and she was like, I don't know, he doesn't like Disney. And I looked at her and I was like, I don't like Disney. And we're like good friends. I was like, at some point you're looking for it.
Have legitimate non-negotiables, but like understand that life's only gonna get harder. So
I think there's this narrative that real love doesn't have problems, or like there's no tension in like real, like true love. And that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like genuinely, it's the dumbest thing I've heard in my life. You can't be a Christian and believe that, because like God loves us and we frustrate him to death, I'm sure, like with our stupidity and stuff like that. Like that's a very weird thought, that real love should be easy. That's not true. Like, I had a friend who got married, and in the course of their like 2 years in their relationship, dating through sort of maybe the first 6 months of their marriage, they're like, we've never had a disagreement. And I remember one of the reasons why I was feeling so like nervous, I was talking to my grandpa, was like, Aaron and I disagree all the time. My grandpa, they have like an incredible story. I've actually thought about like writing a book about like their story. My grandparents, he was like, if two people in a relationship never fight, that's either because they're not using their heads or they're lying to each other. Like, normal human beings will disagree. I think we'll have a generation that, I think one of the reasons why so many different people are waiting so long to be committed is because their relationship faces a challenge and they either bail, they're I don't want to say lazy, but they just don't want to deal with it and work through it. Or they have this false narrative that a real genuine connection is easy.
It shouldn't be this
hard. And it just couldn't be further from the truth. And so I do think, I mean, there's obviously, you can give all the caveats and all the balancing statements. Is it wrong to end a relationship? Absolutely not. Are there right ways to end a relationship? Yes. And we should probably talk about those in another podcast, because I've heard of 100 terrible things. Like, you know, like of ways people end relationships. But I do think, I will say that I have had conversations in pastoring different young adults where a lot of their reasons for breaking up, I'm not going to say they weren't good reasons, because to each their own, but to me, they were reasons that, yes, you could break up, or these are things that mature people who want to be together just work through.
Absolutely.
They weren't breaches of trust. They weren't like, you know, cheating. They weren't stealing, you know, like some of those like super major things. That's like, this is a really good reason to break up. It was really random things that I was like, oh, sure, break up. If they're not your cup of tea, break up. You're not married, you're not committed, whatever. But if you're going to be in a committed relationship, you will have to work through these things. And I do think and again, I'm not trying to blame everything on dating apps, because I actually think dating apps are a cool, like really cool thing. As somebody that's never downloaded a dating app, because I'm just too old for that. It's not because I'm like so mature. I'm just, just age. But I do think it can promote this idea of, if there's tension, if there's conflict, if there's fiction, I'll just move on. And you will never, like, this sounds terrible and I don't mean this to be scary, but you'll get divorced. That's divorce. Like, this is hard, I'll move on. That's divorce. That's not every situation of divorce, but like that at the root, that is sort of a narrative of divorce is this is difficult. I don't want to deal with this. I will then move on. And so, yeah, I do think we're too quick to end relationships. I do think we need to learn the art of working through challenges with somebody that we care about. And the hard thing about that is it sucks.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
But hopefully, if you're doing it well and you're doing it right, it gets easier. You learn more about the other person.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean conflicts go away. It just means you learn how to deal with those conflicts and challenges better and more efficiently.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Honor.
So, guys, it's a conversation. These are going to be topics and things that we might cover more in depth in sermons and maybe podcasts in the future. So, if these conversations on relationships are interesting to you, if you want to know more about them, we would love to invite you to our new relationship series titled
TBD.
Coming in March after the one event. So remember, one event, February 27th. Invite people to it. Invite your friend. Pray for that person that you believe needs to be there. And we'll be kicking off our relationship series the Thursday after the one event, starting in March. Be sure, sorry, I'm like, my brain just went like totally blank. If you like this podcast, you think this conversation was beneficial to yourself or maybe somebody that you would know, be sure to share it with a few people. And if you haven't yet, like and subscribe to our podcast. Give it 5 stars. If you don't like this, if you think that we're just a bunch of knuckleheads having really random conversations, then just move on. Go find something else. There's a podcast called the Afterthoughts Podcast. It's amazing. Go listen to those guys or listen to both. You can do whatever you want. You're a free, autonomous human being. But like, subscribe, share. And then if you are a young adult in the area, Kaci, when do we normally do young adults?
Hello, Thursdays, 7 o'clock at the Lakewood campus. It's a great time. We're going to be there this Thursday. And then you can also come to Red Rocks Church on the weekend, where we have church on Saturday at 5 o'clock, Sunday, 8, 10, and 12 at all of our Denver-based locations.
Yeah, if you're here in Denver, come to church on a Sunday or a Saturday. I'm normally at Littleton on Saturday. Sunday, I'm here at Lakewood. Come find me and say hello.
Yeah.
And for you guys, I guess you just want them to leave you alone.
You could say, hey, don't touch my neck or don't come up from behind. A lot of people like to do that game with me. Does that happen to you?
I do not know what you're talking about right
people like to do the shoulder tap thing with me. Like, I touched your shoulder. JK, I'm over here. I'm like, you're a grown adult person.
Just don't make it weird. Just
Intern
say hi.
Jake.
Yeah. Speaking of intern Jake, guys, we have a special segment coming up, maybe a little bonus episode, bonus attachment. I think we did this in our previous episode, but we have a segment called Ask an Intern, where we are going to spend a couple minutes sitting down with an intern or a few of our interns here at Young Adults. We're going to be sort of having a very generalized conversation about relationships with them, as well as sharing their experience as an intern with Red Rocks Church. Our internship applications are currently open, and we would love for you to hear about the internship from people who are currently in it. So we're going to get some of their thoughts on relationships, as well as asking them questions surrounding the internship. So stay tuned. It'll be right after this. Yeah. Moment. Yes. We're so professional, guys. So, all right.
Never know how to end these.
Yeah. Never know how to end them. So I just keep on
Bye.
talking until I find the right sentence that works. All right. We'll see you in a couple weeks, guys. Peace out.